Hi, I'm Tyler, and welcome to another episode of my Christian Music Week reviews. Each week I take 5 releases, LPs or singles, and after I listen to them all week, I come back here and I review them. I share what I think about them. So without further ado, let's get to this week's first release, Kanye West's new album, Donda. Kanye West's new album, Donda. Let's dive into it. So, pretty good album here. Overall, there's a few parts that I wasn't particularly caring for, like the hook for Jail that I thought was a little repetitive, and also on God Breathes, I kind of didn't care for at first, at least when I didn't care for when it went off into the synth and sing part after it starts off kind of aggressively. And on No Child Left Behind, I would have liked a little more lyrics and not as much instrumental. But overall, really like this album here, and it ultimately, I think, came to grow on me as I listened to it more. Stylistically here, definitely a hip-hop release. And as for how that manifests itself here, so some hard-hitting, some more chill, and quite a bit that falls in between, I would say. And also, the hip hop sounds are often combined with other elements like pop, R&B, and gospel. Yes, the Sunday service choir does make a couple appearances, at least a couple appearances on here. And as for the lyrics here, touches on a few different themes here. He talks about how he trusts God's remote control plan for his life to bring him out of the valley, even when it seems against all odds. And also, he talks about how God doesn't let him drown, but rather lets him walk on water. And also, Kanye talks about how Jesus is the ultralight beam that gave him a pure soul, and how he's going off the leash for God as a result, and off the grid from anyone that would want to push him back to the old him. He also talks about his relationship with Kim Kardashian on a few of the songs here. He talks about how Kim still loves him, and he talks about how he wants her to feel his love for her again as well. And also talks about how they need God to heal their marriage. Up next, P.O.D's 20th anniversary edition of their album Satellite. P.O.D's 20th anniversary edition of Satellite. Let's dive into it. So, really good album here. Stylistically, pretty heavy overall. Definitely a mix of metal and hard rock here. Vocally, we have screaming and rapping, and some singing too. We do have a couple layer tracks at some point, and a couple tracks are instrumental as well. Though instrumental can be heavy too at a couple points. And as for what's different about this edition, well, in addition to the whole Satellite album being remastered, there's also bonus tracks, demos, and different versions of some of the songs. The remixes of Youth of the Nation give it a pretty hip-hop feel here. And as for the lyrics here, pretty good lyrics here too. Talks about being the lost youth of the nation and looking for love. And Sonny talks about how God has made him alive and looks to him as the satellite to make it through a ghetto this world, and how he can't deny God no matter what others say because God has made him alive. And P.O.D. also talks about rocking the party to spread God's love no matter what the backstabbers who say they can't say. Up next, Chris Renzema's new album, Get Out of the Way of Your Own Heart. Chris Renzema's new album, Get Out of the Way of Your Own Heart. Let's dive into it. So, stylistically here, definitely an alternative feel for sure. We also have a few overall, but we also have a few acoustic tracks. Without You definitely has a pop feel to it. And Just As Good has kind of a worship feel to it. Now, as for the lyrics here, pretty good lyrics themes here. Touches on a few different themes. Talks about how you'll never live till you let go of your regret and worry. And get out of the way of your own heart, so to speak. And also talks about how Chris also talks about how even when his faith falters, Jesus is still the good Prince of Peace. Chris also talks about how God is his old friend that it just keeps getting better with. And he also talks about how we need to be Christ's body to this world, reflecting Jesus' stronger love to those who have the same heart, soul, blood, and bone as we do. Up next, so pretty good lyric themes here. Up next, RMG's new mixtape, Highlight Tapes, Volume 1. RMG's new mixtape, Highlight Tapes, Volume 1. Let's dive into it. So, this features some artists, including Derek Minor. Actually, Derek Minor is on every song. And if you look for this release on streaming services, it's under Derek Minor's name. However, this is actually an RMG mixtape for the label in general. So, that's why I've chosen to put this video under RMG's name. But do search up Derek Minor's name for this release if you're looking for this on your streaming service. Anyhow, Derek Minor's on here, Cannon's on here, John Keefe is on here, Paris Carrez, Byron Duane, Roy Tosh, and others. Pretty good mixtape here, stylistically, definitely a hip-hop release. Pretty hard-hitting, some tracks more so than others, but overall, definitely retains that feel throughout the album. Instrumentally here, we have synth, 808, and bass. And vocally, rapping is at the top for sure, but also some singing and sing-rapping too. And as for the lyrics here, Derek and his fellow rappers talk about Derek and his fellow artists talk about being the underdog and working hard into pain and turning setbacks into advantages. and as badly as the opposition may want him and everybody else on this mixtape to miss, they're gonna keep making plays and won't stop till they get to the top, and will just keep winning. Up next, our last release for today, Sean Feucht and Eddie James' new album, Let Us Worship, West Palm Beach. Sean Feucht and Eddie James' new album, Let Us Worship, West Palm Beach. Let's dive into it. But before I do, let me just take a minute to talk about what Let Us Worship is. So, Sean Feucht's movement, Let Us Worship, takes a stand for religious freedom and also calls for revival here in America. Now, let's dive into this actual album. So, at first I thought it was it wasn't as upbeat as the first two albums that I reviewed of his. He has put out a lot of albums from the events he's done all over the country for Let Us Worship, but I've only reviewed two of them as of far. Both are pretty good, by the way. But my first thought about this particular album, West Palm Beach, is that it didn't have as many upbeat songs as his other ones did. But, so I didn't think it was as good at first, but then overall I came to love this album too. Like this album too. So stylistically here, a worship out, pretty much worship, but Eddie James does stick some gospel influence into three of the songs here. And as for lyrics here, pretty good lyrical themes here. Talks about being overwhelmed by God's love and his presence until it changes us to loving him back with all of our hearts. Until he changes us, I should say, to loving him with all our hearts. Also talks about asking the Holy Spirit to cast out the spirit of heaviness over America and ignite revival in America. And also calls for oneness in the church. Christ is bride, as God the Father and Jesus the Son are one, regardless of political party or race. And ultimately, and also, and this unity is so that others may know that we're Christians by our love. That they may know we're Christians by our love. Well, that's it for this week. Come back next week for 5 more releases. If you like what you saw in this video, please subscribe. I put out videos every Friday at 9:30 a.m. Pacific time. And speaking of new videos, I'm going to put out an extra video on Monday at that time, because earlier this week I got a request from a rapper named Danji to review his release, The Kingdom Citizen. It came out a few months ago, but hey, it came out a couple months ago, but hey, who am I to pass up an artist that requests me to review his own release? So I'm gonna review that. And Jake, I'm also gonna review Out of Fairness to You, since obviously I want to treat all my subscribers the same. I'm also gonna review Mandisa's compilation EP, Waymaker, Miracle Worker, that I previously turned down for being too far out. So look for a Mandisa and Danji review on Monday. Also, if you have any thoughts on today's release or what you may have said about them, let me know in the comment below. Also in the comments, you can request any awesome releases that came out today that you want to see in next week's video. Also, check out the playlist section for my Music Month and Dreams playlist, which this month features songs from artists like Aaron Schust, We Are Messengers, 10th Avenue North, Kane, and others. So feel free to go and check that out. Well, go now. See you next week. Bye. Oh, the playlist is available on YouTube and Spotify. I'll go now. See you next week. Bye.